Thanks, Linus, for sharing the opportunities across Africa. We very much also share those and believe in those, and that's why we started 4 years ago as Ringier, our businesses, our operations in Africa. And I'd like to share with you a bit from a practical perspective how we think about the continent and where we see really the opportunities. So just to give you a short overview on Ringier, we are a 200-year-old media company, largest media company in Switzerland. And back in 1989, after winning everything in Switzerland, we decided to expand. Once the Iron Curtain fell, legend has it, one of our managers was sent over the border with a suitcase with 50,000 Swiss francs to build newspapers and news organizations there in Eastern Europe. And this is an important part when you look at Ringier overall. The company was built on journalism and on publishing. That's really at the core of our DNA and of what we do. And to a certain extent, that might have been at the core of our DNA for a little bit too long. Nearly here, what you see is that we joined the digital party quite late, actually in 2008, 2009, still less than 10% of our revenue coming from digital. And we are a family-owned company, so what then happened was quite a drastic change and a drastic investment of the family, which invested more than 1.5 times our annual turnover into transforming the company within a very short time frame. So that nowadays we're doing more than 40% of our revenue and about 65+% of our EBITDA from digital. And as part of this transformation, we did not only turn to more revenue streams coming through the internet, but also positioned ourselves as a diversified media company. That means that nowadays in Central and Eastern Europe, we are running ticketing services, we do events, we do radios, we do sports marketing, and we do classifieds, e-commerce, everything that's connected with that. So what are we doing overall in emerging markets? What's our strategy there? We have a footprint in Eastern Europe, that's what I mentioned before, where we entered early and we played really a mass reach game. In Asia, we're more focused on special interest, also due to the regulation that you have there. So there we have, for example, franchises for Elle, for Forbes. We're targeting a lot of the expats in those markets. And we also run the largest classifieds platforms. Those 50,000 Swiss francs that went over the border back in 1989 in Eastern Europe nowadays, nevertheless, have transformed into a 600 million euro revenue operation in a 50-50 joint venture with Axel Springer. And this quite well describes how we see our emerging market strategy, which is for medium-sized corporation at best like us, is to go in early, take a #1 position, and then figure out a way either to defend that #1 position in our special interest part in Asia, we can do that by ourselves, or partner up with the best to carry that forward like we did in Eastern Europe with Axel Springer. Now, why Africa? You already heard a lot of the data behind Africa and a lot about the opportunity. What we did when we looked at Africa is we looked at Northern Africa and we saw that culturally it's quite different from the rest of the continent, and it's tough to actually create easy synergies there. We looked at South Africa and we saw that, again, for the size of company that we are, it will be hard to go in with the necessary funds and really easily build a market leadership there. So what we have done is we identified 9 interesting key regions that you can see here. We're already active in 7 out of them, and we looked at them a little bit closer. And you will always hear that comparison about the size of Africa. So the size, the landmass is about the same size as Europe. The population in those markets is also about the same, more or less, as Europe. And then if you look at the GDP, this is of course where the similarities end. There you still have a big gap. So how did we go about doing business there and about how selecting these kind of markets? And there's two factors which eventually come into play when you look at African markets there. And just to flag this, the data on this will change already year on year. So I'm presenting here 2014 numbers. I think PwC's for 2015 already had a big shift in them. And the two factors that we see is really what is the current actual size of the market. It needs to already make sense to do a business there today. What are the kind of growth rates and the opportunities that we expect? And the second part, and this is something that you need to be ready for when doing business in Africa, is external shocks. And that can be both on the positive and on the negative side. And in the last 4 years, we had a couple of good surprises, very stable elections, for example, in Nigeria and Tanzania and in Kenya. And there can be bad surprises with high fluctuations of your currencies, for example, in Ghana or currently in Nigeria, which is under pressure of the oil price. So if you decide to enter Africa, you really need to be ready to have a kind of long-term strategy with regards to this. Now, this is the opportunity. You already heard it from Linus before. And the biggest one that everybody is talking about is this emerging African middle class. So we can see that if you look at any African capital over the last 4 years, you have huge developments, you have construction everywhere, you have malls everywhere, the amount of cars seems to double, the quality of cars also seems to go up. You have big infrastructure projects across the continent, and that's the reason why we're in Africa. That's why we believe in it. You just have many more people that have more money to spend. Nevertheless, you also have to be careful when you look at these kind of studies, what you actually see as discretionary income. So this is the most famous one from McKinsey, and what you can see there is that what they mention as emerging consumers starts at 5,000 to 10,000 US dollars per year as income. So, and from that, for example, if you're BMW, this will not be your customer, so you will only have a much, much smaller target size. What we also see is that this growth is continuous, but we believe it will be more or less linear. It's a very, very promising trend, but we are not where maybe China was 10, 12 years ago, that you're in the middle of a hockey stick and you really see an explosion of wealth across the continent at the moment. Where you see this kind of exponential growth, however, is really when it comes to this digital transformation, when it comes to people using smartphones. Nowadays, you have more people using smartphones than actually have a stable electricity connection at their home. And we talked to one of the largest telcos in our market. What they told us is that they sold, just in December 2015, more smartphones than in the entire year 2014. So there you really have this hockey stick right now. People consuming, or people, first of all, buying smartphones. So we believe in the next 2 to 3 years, also in Eastern and Western Africa, you will get to penetration rates of 100% of up, because people just get SIM cards from various providers. And that also really defines how people are using the internet. We are not talking, when we talk about the digital consumer in Africa, we don't talk about somebody who sits with a Google Fiber line at their home and browses the web on a MacBook. We talk about somebody who's on 4G with a Chinese smartphone. And so these two trends, or these two factors, really the kind of linear, steady GDP growth and this kind of exponential growth of African digital consumers is where we see the opportunity. Essentially, there's, to give you that context, there's a famous study from Deloitte, which is asking consumers about their behavior with their mobile phones. And many people said that sometimes they skip lunch to actually have the money available to call home or to buy some data and consume news on their mobile phone. So based on that, there's a couple of opportunities in Africa that we have identified and that I just would like to highlight from a macro perspective and then tell you what we are doing about them. So the first one is retail. Retail is not at all organized in Africa. That means you don't, or the supermarkets that you have a few, the selection there is quite poor and the price is quite high. Then you have the small kiosks on the side of the road, which are affordable to the population, but where you will only ever get a very limited selection of goods. And then you have a large informal economy about people that know a guy who has connections to the Somali plane that's flying in from London to Nairobi on a daily basis, and he might get you a good price on some Samsung TVs or some phones that they are bringing in. And so there is a large opportunity to go into this space and to tackle it, but at the same point in time, you have the big barrier of logistics cost and of warehousing costs in Africa. It's tough to predict demand, and therefore there's not very many players, or in fact there's only one player at the moment that tries to play the Amazon game on a big scale, which is Jumia from Rocket Internet. We still see an opportunity when you go in via price. I'll come to that later. So looking at the advertising markets, and there was some great insights from PwC about the growth rates of the advertising markets, which are encouraging. What we see here is that still digital is, if you look at total advertising budgets, depending on the industry, maybe at 8 to 15% overall. The good news is, though, that clients and agencies alike have understood that mobile is where it's at and are more and more really demanding specific customized mobile solutions. And so unfortunately this kind of data we don't really have available for Africa specifically, which would be great to see. Maybe Google could share that with us. But what we are seeing here is that this picture, which is global for 2014, in Africa will actually look quite different. And what we are focusing on for our publications, because of mobile, is to create a lot more specific video content for advertisers and to really look into native advertising. There's always the statement that display is dead in the West. We say in Africa it never was really born yet, and it will need some very customized, great solutions for mobile phones. Another opportunity which makes a lot of sense for Ringier, because we are the largest classifieds player in Switzerland, in Eastern Europe, and because of the informal economy that I described before, is classifieds. This is a model that so far in every emerging market has taken off, and we don't really believe that in Africa this will be any different, and offers huge potential across the continent. Now, what are we doing in Africa? Eventually, the first couple of years, we took our time. So if you come to the continent and you think, okay, within 3 to 4 months I'll have my operations up and running, I'll challenge you to that. So we used, first of all, our first 1 to 2 years to do a lot of prototyping, put various products into the markets and see what kind of response we were getting for that. And out of that, and out of the success and the testing that we did there, we crystallized a strategy. So just to give you one example, we launched our e-commerce operations first in Kenya, because there you have a mobile payment system, which means you can already operate from the beginning much more cost effectively, because you don't really have to offer cash on delivery to such a scale. We launched our mass news, or our entertainment news platform, first in Nigeria, simply because it's the largest market, and within a short time frame you can generate a lot of reach and really get a good feeling for the market and what it requires, and scale your operations accordingly. So nowadays we have arrived at the point where we're quite happy with what we have in our current countries, and can really now focus on scaling these existing operations and also bringing them to additional markets across Africa. So this is exactly what we do. This is the 4 pillars of our strategy. Content is really at the core, as I said before, of what Ringier does. And when we talk content, we rather go the Eastern European approach than the Asian approach. So mass reach platforms, news platforms. And to just give you some gauge of success there, the largest Nigerian print newspaper, which is in the market since about 25 years, has a print run of 35,000 on a daily basis. We are in the market since about 24 months, and we are doing nearly 10 times that. So what we really can do there is reach people that have never even looked at a newspaper and offer them something on their mobile phones in a much shorter format that they can consume on a daily basis. Classifieds, what I mentioned before, there we believe really in a horizontal first strategy, where we also first take our learnings once we have built market-leading platforms. So we have the largest platform in Senegal, for example, the largest horizontal classifieds, and we now have more than 80% of all real estate agents of Senegal using our platform. So now is the time for us to say, okay, we built them a dedicated real estate vertical and can offer them their additional services. Deals or e-commerce. There we see our forte more, not so much as at the scale game, but more at really playing the price game and very much understanding demand, and then through our other platforms really push to this audience very specific products which helps us to keep a certain profitability level across our platforms as well. And then marketing, and that's really the big new addition to Ringier Africa that we didn't have on our agenda about 4 years ago. Here we saw that many of our clients, local clients as well as international players that were advertising on our content platforms had trouble in running great digital marketing operations or even creating great digital creative in Africa. And since we already have our operations set up, whether that's social media, whether that's doing good content, good video, this was an opportunity where we said, hey, we can help you. If you want to advertise on Pulse, our platform, then we can actually do the video for you. We can run your social media. We can do your paid marketing. We are, I think, the second official Google partner as an agency in Nigeria. This is something that just very much fits our value chain here. Now, this is a short overview of the platforms in Africa. In general, if you're not willing to run local operations in Africa, probably don't even really think about it. So in all of these countries, we actually have local offices and local operations. What you can do is you can create certain synergies between the regions. So for us, that's really East Africa, that's English-speaking West Africa, and Francophone West Africa. Now to share some practical learnings with you. This might sound silly, but the hardest thing to get right in Africa is finding and building great teams. You have great talent available, but most of your employees that you get will be probably under 30. Most of them will be just out of high school, university, and many of them will not have great experience with digital simply because digital is still very, very young across Africa. And in accordance with that, that's what Linus said before, salaries are quite low. So a couple of $100 from a competitor really might make people think about switching their job. And so it's very important that you build great teams, great loyalty, and have really a uniting vision for your people because you will have to invest a lot in their training. Mobile first, we talked about that already this afternoon. 80% of the combined traffic that Ringier has across its platforms in Africa, that's including e-commerce, comes from mobile. So, and if we talk about mobile, you might say, okay, then let's just develop an iPhone app and an Android app. That's not really going to work because mobile is incredibly fragmented there. You have various screen sizes by various Chinese smartphone providers that come into play. You have various versions of all of the operating systems set up there. So iOS app, you don't even really have to think about it. Nobody's using iOS. Android, much more used there, but really your top priority should be to have a great website that doesn't necessarily look great on your big laptop screen, but that it looks really good on a small feature or smartphone screen. This also means you have to rethink a little bit your metrics. I like the idea of making every site load within 3 seconds. I would believe that the tolerance level in Africa is a little bit higher there, and that you need to make sure that you actually serve all of the right information on a very, very small screen within the most efficient time possible. Monetize wherever you see opportunity. I don't know how many of you might have heard about what happened to Nestle recently in Africa. They came to the continent, to West Africa specifically, with a lot of money, with a lot of assumptions, with a big playbook written somewhere in Switzerland. And they got quite burned. They had to divest some of their factories, actually. And we see one of the main factors in there that they didn't actually take enough time to really get to know the market. In addition to that, really what we build around our publishing operations is an ecosystem where we see ourselves as a PR agency, for example, for the celebrities that you have in Nigeria and in Ghana. So what we did recently is we took one of the largest celebrities of Nigeria, and together with Jack Daniels, we sent him to Tennessee to actually learn about where Jack Daniels is coming from. We covered all of that on Pulse. We even had a specific section, and when we then created a lot of content that's very shareable for the client to also play via their own social media channels and to actually cover this kind of event. We do a lot of video, which we believe will be one of the main consumptions of content on mobile going forward. And we also do events. So for example, as part of this ecosystem, we have on Friday nights the Pulse VIP night, where we invite stars to play in a club. We promote this event on Pulse, on our platforms, and then we give people or advertisers the opportunity to affiliate themselves with the stars, so maybe holding up the newest techno handphone during the concert and in a video on the website, and give them the opportunity to sponsor these kind of events. So really doing whatever makes sense. Finding partners is very important if you want to be fast in Africa. So there's two of the greatest entrepreneurs that we know there, Kirk Gillis and Mapenda Diop. Both of them built the largest classifieds platforms in Senegal and in Tanzania, respectively. And we wanted to enter both of these markets, so we sat down with them and we cut a deal eventually where Ringier is providing the technology, the know-how and the funding, and they are bringing in their local operations and their know-how of the market, which probably saved us realistically about 6 months to 1 year versus just building our own operations there. Nevertheless, be also careful with whom you partner. You will have, if you come in as a foreign investor, a lot of people that are very interested to talking to you, and you should always gauge their intentions correctly. And just the last point to sum up the presentation kind of is that we really believe more in mass reach as before specialization at the moment in Africa. Through the fact that you have all of these external shocks going in, through the fact that you have more or less a linear growth when it comes to your population at this point in time, we believe that it's better to be diversified when it comes to your operations and what you do. And we believe that at this point in time, the real big opportunity isn't catching everybody that might go digital and might go online, and that you do that rather through mass products than through special interest. Good. Thank you very much.